I want you to picture the last time you were in a genuinely high-stakes meeting.
Oh, yeah. We've all got one of those memories.
Right. Maybe you were pitching a new strategy, or maybe you were just trying to explain why a major project was late.
Always a tough spot.
Yeah, and you start talking. And you feel like you're making sense, but then you look at the faces across the table.
And they're just glazing over.
Exactly. They are completely glazing over.
Yeah.
So you start adding more details, describing the whole process, explaining how hard the team worked.
The rambling spiral.
The rambling spiral, yes. The more you talk, the smaller you feel. You can literally feel your authority evaporating in the room.
You feel the ground slipping, so you talk faster to try and catch yourself, which of course only makes it worse.
It really does. And someone else chimes in, usually a senior leader, and they say one sentence, just one, and the room stops.
Everyone nods.
Everyone nods. And you're sitting there thinking, what just happened? Why did they sound like a judge handing down a verdict and I sounded like I was making excuses?
It's incredibly frustrating because it feels like a personality trait, right? Like some people just inherently have presence.
Yes, like it's a genetic gift.
But what we're diving into today suggests it's not magic at all. It's not even really about confidence.
It's about engineering.
Exactly.
Which is fascinating. I mean, engineering implies blueprints and math.
Yeah.
But we're talking about language here.
We are. But the guide we're breaking down today for this deep dive argues that professional authority is actually a structural issue. It's about how you build your sentences.
Okay.
Specifically, it looks at the humble and often completely ignored verb to be, is, am, are, and it treats that verb as the concrete foundation of reality.
The logic of existence. That is the theme we're unpacking today.
It's a great title.
It is. And I have to say, looking at these concepts, this isn't your standard grammar lesson. It looks more like an instruction manual for a jet engine.
That's the perfect mindset to have for this. Forget English class. We are looking at the hidden code of authority.
The mission here is to walk through this visual guide and see exactly how to stop telling stories and start defining reality.
Let's get into it.
So let's lay the foundation. The very first concept in this guide is startlingly simple, but also massive. We are looking at a visualization of a construction site.
Steel beams, open sky.
Right. And sitting right there in the middle of all this construction is a giant black cube.
And on the side, stamped in heavy white letters, is the word BE.
It looks incredibly heavy. Like if you dropped it, it would crack the pavement.
That's entirely the point.
But
the guide labels this as a static definition, but the crucial note is the arrow pointing right to the bottom corner.
it says load-bearing.
Load-bearing.
That's a purely architectural term. A load-bearing wall holds up the roof.
Right. Take it out and the whole house falls down.
So how does that apply to the verb to be?
Well, think about our normal speech. We love action words, right? In business especially, we optimize, we leverage, we pivot.
Oh, I hear pivot 10 times a day.
Right, but those are decorative, they move things around. But the verb to be, that heavy BE block, that is what actually holds the weight of the sentence. It creates the structural framework, or as the guide calls it, the grammatical system.
So if I'm in that meeting I mentioned earlier, and I'm pivoting and optimizing all over the place, but I haven't dropped this black cube.
You haven't actually built anything.
I haven't built anything, wow.
You haven't defined anything. You're just moving furniture around in a house that doesn't even have walls yet.
That makes so much sense.
Before you can argue for a strategy, you have to define what the strategy is. You have to place that heavy black cube. The strategy IS risky, the timeline IS tight.
Those are load-bearing statements.
Exactly. They hold the weight of the argument. You can't persuade anyone until you define existence first.
That's a huge shift in perspective.
Yeah.
I usually think of is and are as filler words, weak words. I always want to use the exciting verbs.
And that's exactly why you end up telling stories instead of making solid points. Which actually leads us perfectly to the next concept in the guide. Yes. This is a side-by-side comparison that I think really exposes the trap most professionals fall into.
It really hit home for me. On the left side, we have an image labeled doing. There's a guy running. You can see these red motion lines behind him.
And there's a play button icon.
Right. It feels frantic, fast.
And on the right?
The right side is labeled being. It's a figure standing perfectly still, caught right in the middle of a set of crosshairs.
And above him.
A pause icon.
Doing versus being. Narrative versus analysis. This right here is the difference between a junior employee and an executive.
Break that down for me.
The left side, the runner, that represents narrative movement, a sequence of events. It's storytelling. First I did this, then I called him. Then we fix the bug.
It's breathless. It's hitting the play button.
Exactly. You are forcing the listener to run alongside you and watch the entire movie of your day. But look at the text on the bottom of this part of the guide.
It says, the be verb freezes a moment in time, shifting focus from performance to fundamental identity.
Freezes a moment in time.
That's the pause button.
Right. When you shift to the right side into the crosshairs, you stop the movie. You aren't telling me how you fixed the bug anymore. You are looking me in the eye and saying, the system is stable.
That feels infinitely more powerful, but also, I don't know, kind of scary.
Scary how?
Because if I say I'm working on it, I'm safe.
Right.
If I say it is stable and then it crashes, I'm in trouble.
But that's exactly why it conveys authority. Authority comes from risk. The being side represents static data. It's definitional authority. It's rigorous analysis.
You are staking a claim.
You are standing in the crosshairs. You're saying, I am defining this reality. It stops the rambling because you aren't describing a process anymore. You're declaring a state.
Okay, I'm totally sold on the philosophy. We need to stop running and stand in the crosshairs.
Stop telling the story.
Right. But how do we actually build these sentences? Because the next part of the guide looks literally like a diagram for a car engine.
It does. It's titled The Concordance Engine. And I love this section because it strips away all the poetry of language and treats it like a cold, hard machine.
Inputs, gears, and outputs.
Exactly.
Let's trace the wiring here. We have 3 inputs on the left. The first one is just the word I.
And it flows into a specific gear.
The AM gear.
Right. It flows into the AM gear. It's a dedicated circuit. You can't plug I into R. The machine would grind to a halt. And the output here is a link to self-identity.
Then we have the second input, he, she, it, or singular object. That pipe goes directly to the IS gear.
This creates isolated units. When you use IS, the engine is basically drawing a circle around one specific thing, a person, a project, a problem, and defining it.
And the third input, we, you, they, or plural group. That feeds into the AA gear.
Which the guide calls the connector for multiplicity.
Now, hold on a second. This seems really basic.
Basic.
Yeah, I mean, I am.
Yes.
We are. We learned this in kindergarten. Why is this presented as a complex concordance engine with gears?
Because in high-pressure situations, people's engines stall.
Fair point.
Think about it. Have you ever heard someone trying to sound really smart in a meeting and they say something like, the data RE suggesting?
Oh, totally. They think it sounds more scientific.
Right, but if they slip up and say the data is in the very next sentence, the gears grind.
It sounds clunky.
The guide calls it morphological precision. If you treat this like a machine, you realize that professional authority comes from the smooth operation of these gears.
So you can't just jam things together.
Exactly. If you put the wrong raw material into the wrong gear, you don't just make a grammar mistake, you break the spell. You look like an operator who doesn't know how to run their own machine.
So the engine is running, we have our inputs. What is the machine actually producing?
That takes us to the next concept, the assembly line moving forward.
It's called the syntactic link.
This might be my favorite visual in the whole guide. It's an equation.
You have the subject block on the left and the complement block on the right.
And in the middle, connecting them, is a massive red gear with an equal sign inside it.
Subject plus BE equals identity.
That equal sign is the key to everything. The guide explicitly states, and I'm quoting here, the be verb does not describe action. It attaches specific properties to the subject to create a complex profile.
It really is math. It's not art.
Not at all.
It's an equation. It's not the market is moving crazily. It's the market equals volatile.
Precisely. When you use action verbs, you're painting a picture. When you use the syntactic link, you are writing an equation. You are locking a property onto a subject. It's binary and absolute.
Okay, so we've locked the property on, but we actually have a choice in how we define that property right.
We do.
The next diagram shows the be verb output splitting into 2 very distinct paths. And the icons here are great, a speedometer and an ID badge.
This is the nuance that separates good speakers from truly great ones. This is about qualitative versus categorical.
Let's look at the top path first. The red arrow points to the word adjective, and we have that speedometer icon. The text calls this a qualitative assessment.
Right, and the example they use is, the methodology is rigorous.
Okay, rigorous. That's an adjective. It describes the methodology.
It measures it like a needle on a speedometer dial. It's saying on the scale of rigor, this is high. It's a quality.
But look at the bottom path. The arrow points to NOUN, and the icon is the ID badge.
Categorical definition.
Right. And the example is, the methodology is a standard.
Do you feel the difference there?
The methodology is rigorous versus the methodology is a standard.
Yeah.
Rigorous feels like a measurement, an opinion almost.
And standard.
Standard feels like a hard fact.
Because standard is an ID badge. You aren't measuring the methodology anymore. You are naming it. You are putting it in a category.
I see.
If I say you are helpful, I'm measuring you. If I say you are a helper, I'm giving you a title.
So if I want to sound more authoritative, I should choose the ID badge over the speedometer whenever I can.
Exactly. Don't just measure the problem by saying the problem is difficult. Name the problem. The problem is a crisis. The ID badge always carries more weight.
This is incredible. It's like a toolkit for tightening the screws in your everyday speech. But so far, we've really only talked about making statements, declarations. What about when we actually need to ask a question?
That changes the structure. The guide calls this next concept the inversion rule.
This is where we see the machinery actually move. The diagram shows a structural shift. Two different states.
Yeah.
State 1 is the declaration.
Right. The infrastructure is resilient.
That's the standard flow we just talked about. Blue diamond, red diamond, black diamond.
But look at state 2, inquiry.
The red diamond, which is the IS block, physically lifts out of the middle and moves to the very front of the line.
Is the infrastructure resilient?
Now, why does this visual matter so much? I mean, we all know how to ask a question in English.
We do. But the guide makes a fascinating point here about tonal inflection.
Overriding tonal inflection, it says.
Right. Think about how people usually signal a question when they are insecure. They use uptalk.
Oh, right. They raise their voice at the end. The infrastructure is resilient.
Exactly. They're basically asking for permission to be right.
It sounds so weak when you hear it out loud.
But the inversion rule says you just need to trust the architecture. Placing the verb before the subject overrides that tonal inflection. If you move the IS block to the front, the syntax itself is the question.
It demands a response.
Yes. You can say it with a completely flat dropping tone. Is the infrastructure resilient?
Is the infrastructure resilient? Whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't need to go up at the end at all.
You don't need to perform the question with your voice. You build the question with the blocks.
Okay, so we've asked the tough question using the inversion rule. Now we need the answer. And the next diagram looks like a literal electrical circuit board.
It's a logic tree titled the response circuit.
We have an incoming question at the top, and then the lines split instantly. A standardized protocol.
Separating yes and then no.
Look at the yes path. It's a magnetic connection. Yes plus subject plus verb.
Yes, it is. Click. Simple.
But the no path, that's where it gets interesting. We have no plus subject plus verb, but then there's this big red brick attached to the end.
The not block.
No is not.
That not block is depicted as a physical breaker. It violently stops the flow of the circuit.
It feels very rigid.
It's standardized. There is no ambiguity here. Think about how people usually answer tough questions when they are nervous.
Well, not exactly. See, the thing is...
Right. They ramble. They go right back to the doing phase, telling a story.
But the response circuit says, don't tell a story, just execute the protocol.
Is the deadline realistic? Don't give me a paragraph.
Yeah.
Use the no path. No, it is not. Bam! The red brick drops. Circuit broken.
It cuts off the negotiation before it even starts.
Exactly.
But there's a trap here, isn't there? Because the next concept is literally labeled troubleshooting.
The true subject detector.
Right. This looks like a really common error. We have a sentence diagram here used for troubleshooting.
The sentence is analyzing market trends is mandatory.
Okay, visually I see a conflict here. The word analyzing is bold and blue, but the words market trends are grayed out and they have a line crossed right through them.
And the verb is in bold red.
So what's the issue?
The conflict is that your ear hears the word trends.
Right, which is plural.
Exactly. So your brain wants to match it with are. Analyzing market trends are mandatory.
It sounds almost right. Trends are mandatory.
But it's wrong, and the guide explains exactly why. Market trends is labeled here as the distractor.
So what's the true subject?
Analyzing. It's a gerund.
A verb acting as a noun.
Right. The rule is when the subject is a singular activity, like a gerund, the verb remains singular regardless of nearby plural nouns.
The act of analyzing is one single thing.
Therefore, the verb must be singular. Analyzing is mandatory.
Don't get tricked by the distractor.
It's a test of your structural focus. The distractor is waving at you, trying to get you to use the wrong gear. Look at the trends, plural. Use are.
But the engineer ignores the distractor. You're defining the act of analyzing not the trends themselves.
It's the difference between sounding like you just speak the language and sounding like you command it.
That one tip is going to save me from so many embarrassing emails.
It catches smart people all the time.
So we've got the core mechanics down, but does this apply everywhere? Or is this just for corporate boardrooms?
That's what the next section covers.
Environmental and abstract states. This is really interesting because it zooms way out.
It's the proof of concept. The guide shows 3 distinct panels to prove that this architecture is universal.
Panel 1 is nature. We've got an icon of the sun and some mountains, and the example is solar radiation ISM intense.
Classification singular phenomenon. Notice the tone of that sentence. It's not arguing, it's not apologizing. The sun doesn't try to convince you it's hot, it just IS.
Panel 2 is time. There's a clock icon. The optimal duration IS 20 minutes.
Singular window. Again, it treats time as a concrete solid block.
And panel 3 is risk. A big warning sign, exclamation point. Operational risks, RE, unavoidable.
Abstract plural. What I love about this section is that it aligns professional speech with the literal laws of nature.
From the sun all the way to risk management.
Right. When you use this structure, when you build the cube, you are essentially trying to borrow the authority of the sun. Solar radiation AS intense. The risk IS high.
You want your strategy to sound as inevitable as the weather.
Exactly.
That is a wildly powerful thought.
Yeah.
You aren't just making a point, you're stating a law of physics.
Which brings us to the final visual in the guide.
The master blueprint.
This puts it all together. It combines every element we've discussed into one final summary flowchart.
So we start on the far left with our inputs, I, he, we,
They flow smoothly into the concordance gears. Am is R.
which drives straight through that massive red gear, the equal sign.
And finally, the output splits and you choose your weapon, the speedometer for a quality or the ID badge for a category.
And the final text at the bottom really brings the whole mission home. The B verb provides the structural integrity required to define the professional world with absolute clarity.
We started this conversation looking at a single black cube on a construction site.
And now we see the whole logical architecture, the whole skyscraper.
It really changes how you see that little 2-letter word, doesn't it?
Completely. It's not filler at all. It's the steel beam holding the whole thing up.
And that's the ultimate takeaway for you listening. If you want to be heard, stop doing. Stop running.
Stop the narrative.
Build the structure.
But here's the challenge for you. The next time you're in a meeting or you're drafting that high-stakes email, catch yourself. Are you the runner? Are you hitting the play button and just telling a story of how hard you worked?
Or are you standing still in the crosshairs?
Right. Watch out for the distractor trap with those gerunds. Use the inversion rule when you ask a question. Don't ask for permission, build the question.
Is the logic sound?
Yes, it is. See what we did there? Thanks for diving in with us today. Now go out and build something solid.
Always a pleasure.